Hello viewers, today we're going to see how to generate an organization chart using Angular and highcharts. I just created a basic project. To get started, we need two packages. One is highcharts and highcharts Angular. So let's go ahead and install them. We just installed the packages, nothing fancy. So let's go ahead and see what we have in the basic project. This is the template that came up with application. When we create a brand new app, it comes with this. The screen what you see comes with that. So we're going to modify it now. While my application is still running, let's go to app component. That's our app component, and we have this HTML. This is the template code that's getting displayed on the screen. So let's clean this up and just put something like app component works, just to test whether this works or not, right? That works. So let's go back and modify and create a new organization chart using highcharts. Let's go to app.component.ts, and the step one would be importing necessary modules, right? So let's go to app.module.ts, and we are supposed to import a module called highcharts chart module, which is coming from highcharts. You can say highcharts chart module. I'm not sure why this is picking up, but that should be picked up from highcharts Angular, right? So let's import that. Highcharts chart module should come from highcharts Angular package. Once you import it and save it, you can see that it's getting resolved. So let's go back to app.component.ts file and import necessary modules in TS file as well. We are supposed to import three things. One is Sankey, that's a module, organization, another module, exporting another module. So we're going to do all that stuff now. So I'm going to import highcharts as well. So I import star as highcharts. Once we import all of them, we're supposed to call highcharts on those modules. Meaning when application starts or where the component starts, it executes line by line. So I'm going to call this here so that it will execute on top of the component. Like whenever the component gets initiated, even before initiation, it's going to call these steps. Sankey dot, you have three different options: highcharts, defaults, and factory. We're going to call highcharts. Similarly, organization, we call highcharts from organization, as well as exporting dot highcharts. So once we import all these three things, this is the step one. This is what we should do. Only this gives us necessary modules. So let's go ahead and do the step two, which is nothing but configuring the highcharts. So as we imported this, so now we just imported highcharts here on line number 2, and we're going to configure that now. We're going to create a variable to catch that. So I'm going to create my charts. That's just my variable, right? And it should be type of highcharts. It's just defining the data type, right? And we have to initialize this. For example, you know how we define a variable, right? Let's say name, and that is of type string, and we are going to initialize it to something like John. Similarly, we are going to define a variable called mycharts, and I'm giving a data type as type of highcharts, and this is not a primitive data type, so that's coming from that's a custom data type coming from a different package, so I'm supposed to use type of there. And then we are supposed to initialize this with actual highcharts coming from import. And here it is erroring out. Let's see why that is. Add an input instead. It is unable to figure out this type of attribute because it's a custom attribute. We didn't import it, but actually we did. Line number 2 is what we imported as highcharts. Either we can make it highcharts and then assign the same thing here or we can just rename the actual value itself. So that should be fine. I just imported the same thing, and that's the data type we are referring to, and we are assigning the same thing to our own variable called mycharts. To avoid all this confusion, all the boilerplate code, now we'll deal with only mycharts here, right? So mycharts is the final highcharts module or final highcharts component that we want to use in our HTML file. That's the idea. So now let's go ahead to HTML and modify this. As we imported highcharts, we are supposed to use highcharts chart as a tag. So this accepts few attributes like highcharts. What highcharts you want to display? That's in data binding that we have to do data binding. So it accepts a value for highcharts. MyCharts is the highcharts that it should use, right? We have MyCharts configured, and this highchart tag expects a highchart object. It has to know what highchart to display, right? So MyCharts is the highchart that this one has to display. Along with this, it also expects how chart should look like, right? That is called configuration. The chart should be like of this length, chart should have this data and stuff like that. We call that as configuration. We'll do that in a minute. We'll configure the chart in a minute, but we are supposed to give this highchart tag a configuration to see how actual chart should look like. So that goes in options. Meaning this highchart tag also accepts a property called options where it expects chart configuration. We can call it chart configuration for now. It complains because we don't have any chart configuration in the TS file. So let's go ahead and create it. That's a variable. Chart configuration is a variable, and I'm just assigning it to an empty array. Let's go back and see what's wrong here. It says it's not a known element. So let's see why that's not a known element. That's not a known element because it's not highcharts. It's highcharts and chart. So that's the tag that's coming from the package. So we are supposed to use it. One thing resolved. Let's go back to the second one. And this one is highcharts, but the property itself is not highcharts. So I think when you do control click, maybe it's not showing here, but it should not be capital C, but it's small c. That's one of the common mistakes that we do. Another thing is options. Let's see what is it. The type never array is not assignable to type highchart options or options. You see, so it is this options property is expecting an object of type highcharts.options. But what we did is just an array. If I go here, I just assign this to an array. Chart configuration is not an array. It follows a specific data, and that is of data type highchart options. How do I know that? When you hover over these options, it clearly says never array is not assignable to type highcharts.options, meaning this chart configuration should be of highcharts.options data type. Let's go back and make it highcharts.options data type. And now this throws some error. Let's hover over it. The type never array has no properties in common with options, so meaning this is not an array, right? Highchart.options is not an array. This is an object. So let's make it an object. You see, now we got all the errors resolved. So we don't have any errors, and chart configuration is an object of type highcharts.options. So that's what we just did. So now if we take a look at the view, we can't see anything because highchart doesn't know what to display in the chart. We didn't give any chart configuration. We didn't tell how chart should look like. It doesn't know anything about it. So if you go to view and take a look at it, you see that's empty because we didn't tell anything about the chart. So now we are going to tell highcharts or Angular that we are supposed to use organization chart. And how do we do that? We can do that by chart configuration. Let's go back and configure the chart. So we come here. Let's open this object. This object has a property called chart, which is another object. It has different properties that we can make use of to configure the chart. So chart object is the one which we use to tell what kind of chart it is. It has a property called type again, which is organization. We are supposed to display an organization chart. That's the reason I went with organization here. If you go to view, I think we still can't see anything at the moment. So we still have to configure many other things. Like at least we have to set the basic data, what has to be displayed in the chart. So let's go ahead and display the data. Before we display the data, let's go ahead and create the data. I'm going to create all my data in data.ts file just to make it cleaner, right? So I'm going to export constant called data. It's an array of objects. So data will be an array of objects. So I'm going to create an object called maybe employee, CEO, manager, right? We have different kind of um, people in the organization. So I'm going to create an data for each and every guy. Let's say for example name. Let's say we have John Doe. He's a guy of title CEO. So I'm going to name title as CEO. He's the CEO of the company. Similarly, this CEO will also have an ID. So I'm just mocking the actual data. So I'm going to give an ID of 111, just for an example. Similarly, we'll have a manager under CEO, right? So I'm going to copy this and create another object called manager. So this guy will be Gene Smith and he's manager. And he has got an ID of 112, for example. A CEO might have many managers, not just one. So I'm going to name it manager 1 and again, I'm going to add another manager as well. This is manager 2. I can call him Robert Williams. And he's going to have a different ID, 113. You can observe IDs are of different numbers, but we can map this ID to the title because IDs has to be unique. So here instead of 111, 112 and random numbers, we can just make it their title. I'm just converting the ID to their title because they'll be unique again. So now we have simple data of CEO and manager. And now what we are supposed to do is create a relation between them. Now we have three different people, but we still have to manage a relation between them. In order to manage a relation, we are supposed to create another relation data, right? So right click, new file, I'm going to call it data relation.ts. So this data will have or will hold all the relations. Again, this is going to be export constant. I'm going to export it as relations, which is an array of objects again. This time we are going to define the relation here. So this object will only have the relations. How can we do that? Using from attribute and to attribute. Like the relation from CEO is to manager. Similarly, if you observe data.ts, we also have a manager 2 which has to be related to the CEO again. Manager 1 is related to CEO and manager 2 also is related to CEO. So I'm going to go back to relations. I'm going to add another object for the relation for manager 2 and he's going to be for CEO again. So now we are done with both data creation and relations. Now let's see how we can configure that in the chart options. I just said chart options, meaning that's nothing but the chart configuration. Chart configuration is often called chart options because in the HTML, it accepts a property called options. Even though it says options, we are configuring it to chart configuration. However, this can also be called as chart options. So I'm going to name it as chart options and I'm going to make it as chart options here. So now we don't have an issue. Now we just created data and its relation. Now it's time for us to configure that in the chat, which means we are supposed to inject those data and relations into the chat. How can we do that? This highchart options has a property called series. It's again an object, but this time it will be an array of objects. So this is the property that accepts data and its relations. As we are supposed to configure two different things, data and relation, it should be an array of objects. So let's open this array and define it. Define an object here. And this is of type organization. So we still have to tell a series that what kind of chart it is. It's an organization chart, so I'm going to name it organization. You can also give it a name, probably like organization chart. Those are the basic stuff. So now we are supposed to define relations. Relations go into a property called data. And how can we define the relations here? We already created a file called data relations. So I'm going to import it. Maybe I export it as relations, right? If you go here, I exported it as relations variable or object name. So that's what I'm going to use it here. So when I go to app.component.ts, I just imported the relations here so that we'll have a clear idea. If this data object, this data property accepts a value of relations. Similarly, we also have actual data. This is just a relation, but where is the actual data? That should go into a property called nodes, because organization chart has nodes. Each and every employee or CEO or manager, so basically each and every entity will have a node in it, and those nodes get connected. So nodes are nothing but it's a list of entities. Entities are nothing but CEO, manager, and employee and stuff like that. So I'm going to define node here, meaning data. I export it as actual data. So I go back to app.component.ts and make it data, and that should come from /data. So enter. So now I have defined relations and data and also type as organization. Let's see how the view is generated with this basic information. Right, we have a CEO as John Doe and we have two relations, Jane Smith and Robert Williams. You can see that it's kind of unorganized, right? They're kind of big boxes, different colors. These are all default values. We didn't give any colors. We didn't define any width. We didn't define any text, color, or stuff like that. So if we don't give anything, highcharts can pick its own colors, own width, and own height. That's the reason you see this. It also gave you a small hamburger icon to see this in full screen. We can also configure all these colors, width, height, and stuff like that for a better view. Before going to that, we'll add few more relations. Currently, we have CEO and managers, and these managers might also have employees. So let's go ahead and configure employees for these things. Just to give us more practice, let's go back to data again and then add few more values here. Meaning currently we have CEO and two managers. I'm going to add two more employees. Now we added two more employees and now we have to define the relations for them as well. So let's go back to data.relation.ts and then define relations. We have two managers related to CEO. So CEO has two managers. Similarly, managers should also have employees. I created two more employees which I will assign to the manager. CEO will have manager, manager will have employees. That's how it is. So I just assigned two employees to manager one. That's how the relation is. Now let's go back and see how the view is generated. You see this? CEO has two managers and manager one has two employees. It clearly defined with the lines. So that's how organization chart should look like. I'm going to go back and modify these things now to give a better look and better feel. You can see chart width is kind of very minimal. Probably we'll make it big to expand to the whole page. How can we do that? Using the chart configurations again. So let's go back to chart configurations. And here I'm going to define width and height of the chart. You see this is chart object. Chart object meaning all the properties related to chart will be here. So I'm going to define a width. Ideally it is of 1900 pixels. So I'm going to make it 1900. If you go back to the view and see, that's how it looks. Now it got expanded to the whole page, which is good. Next thing I want to define is these boxes. Each and everything here is called a node. You can also see that box is cut. I bet it's not complete here. It's incomplete. That's because of the height. So let's go back and increase the height of the chart as well. The chart height itself is trimming down some of the nodes. Each and every box is called a node. So it is trimming out some of the nodes. So I'm going to make it maybe like 600. Let's see. I think it's still a bit off. That's because probably of node thing probably. So let's go ahead and define nodes and node configuration. Surprisingly, all node configuration goes into the series, right? So because nodes are here, we're supposed to configure things here. Like we can define node width, for example. You see, we have all these things. Node width, I can make it 100, and that's going to increase the node width to something like that. You see, now we have a better width here. We can also define different stuff for the data labels. So currently data labels is of like black color. Like we have data label is on black. We can change that stuff as well using data labels property. Go back here and let's go to a new property called data labels. This is kind of common data labels object. We can just use a style object here to define color. Right? Let's say if I make it white, change to white. You see it's all white now. Earlier there are some black, but it's all white now. And I'll change font size to 10 pixel. That looks a bit better. Now we are supposed to cut down node height as well. Let's go back here and do along with node width. Let's see, we have node height. There is no property called node height, and we are supposed to give node height within the node itself. So that's a problem, right? So we are supposed to give node height to each and every node, meaning to the data property. Nodes are in the data property. So if we go to data, this is where we have to define the node height, like this height, like we can give like 30. If I give 30 and go back, you can see it's getting affected only for the CEO part. You see, we have like node 30. 30 is kind of trimming on the text, so I'm going to give a bit more than 30. That is 40. And let's go ahead and see. Perfect. Now it is like quite visible with the given height. Similarly, we are supposed to do all this stuff for all of them, each and every node. See, now we have a better look. We can also define colors for each and every node. For example, this has a decent height, but this trimmed down all the stuff. So this is basically manager 2, right? So if you go back to data tree, manager 2 is what it's trimming down the data. Either we can increase this specific height to 60. Now that's perfect. That's because we have a different name here, so name has to be fixed. If this is the case, we just need only 40 here. That's perfect. Similarly, we can also change colors for each and every one of them, each and every node, meaning we can give a property called color. So I'm going to change color to all of these nodes, the background color. You see, we gave a color to each and every node here. To differentiate each and every role, like for example, we have CEO, managers, and employees. To differentiate them, we are going to give a different colors. So CEO will have slate blue, and managers, all the managers will have probably misty rose, you can say. That's kind of very light, we can't see. So we can just make it maroon. That's better, right? You can see the CEOs have slate blue, all the managers, you can color code them. Similarly, employees will have a different color. Probably I'll go with yellow green. So just looking at this, you'll understand that it's, excuse me. Yeah, looking at this, you'll understand what role has what color. Like based on the color codes, you can clearly identify how many of them are. For example, if I just go ahead and add employees, two more employees. Currently we have on the data, we're going to add employees. So currently we have two employees. I'm going to add two more employees, employee 3 and 4. Just defining employees is not sufficient. So we are also supposed to define the relations. So currently employee 1 and 2 are under manager 1. I'm going to create two more employees for manager 2, which is 3 and 4. Like employee 3 and 4 are supposed to be under manager 2. If you go look at the view, you can see all these 4 are employees, 2 are managers, 1 is CEO. That's how you define it. That's the organization chart. You can see the chart title as chart title. We can also change the title. Go here to app component.ts and chart title goes under here. So we have a title property and that's an object again, and the text would be company organization. You can name it anything. So if I go back, take a look at this, you see we have the title here. I know it might be looking too small, but we can always configure it to look big. That's all about the organization chart. Thank you so much for watching.